Welcome, welcome. Once again, we are live.
It's good to see you, Greg.
Hey there, how are you, my friend?
Doing all right, and you, sir?
Life is good. No complaints here. Thanks for joining us here, Justin. I know you've been,
Thank you for having me, Greg.
yeah, always good to have you here. So there's a lot to go through, and I thought this would be just a little quick show, but then I started taking the notes on just the information in the 488-page document. It's like there's a little bit more than I had anticipated, but so I wanted to make sure that we go through the pages that we do have in this document, in this 488-page document. It's pages 285 to page 308. So we'll definitely make sure we get through those. And I'm just going to check here on YouTube to see how all that's coming through. Looks like the visual is good. And audio sounds good. Alright. The delay, not too much either. It's only like maybe 5-10 seconds, so that's good. But
Which document was that, Greg?
so this is the BCA document, the 488-page document that we got from the BCA. This is the most recent document we got on September 20th, 2018. So I do have that, and if anybody wants to download that, you can download that for yourself from my website, Greg Fernandez Jr. If you Google or search for David Crowley research documents, it should come up. But you can also go to my website and go to the gray stage section and go to the research documents. That'll take you right there. I pretty much have, and I need to update this too because it's not as user friendly as I would like. I'd like all of the documents that we have to be in one simple place where everybody can just grab that link, download it for themselves, and check it out. So that's it's 488 pages. That's a lot. That's a lot to go through.
Yes.
So, and we've gone through it a couple times, but I never really put any focus on the Notepad. So I wanted to just kind of cover some of the stuff here, and we'll just go through these tests. There's a lot that they actually did here, but the one thing that I noticed here is I was calculating. Wait a minute. Okay, we got 15. There's 59 pages that were in the Notepad, yet for some reason we only have there's only 24 pages of the actual Notepad. So I'm assuming that the pages that we don't have here are pages that were blank, that have nothing on them. So that's my guess. I'm hoping that that's true, because I was hoping we would have 59 pages here to go through, but we only have 24. So.
And what page of the PDF did it start at again?
So on the PDF, if you go to page 285, that's where it'll start, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump there too. So 285 is where it all begins.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And originally this was a 80-page notepad, and when the police found it, there were only 59 pages, front and back too. So that's the other thing. And you can tell that this was meant to be just a type of budget book. That was the purpose of this one here. So for whatever reason, they it went from a budget book, it turned into David Crowley. David Crowley had some writing on it, and at the end there's some recipes from his wife. So this book had multiple purposes, or this notepad, but it was not.
It's easy to tell the difference between the two's handwriting because Kamel definitely had the better handwriting.
Yeah, whose handwriting do you think this is here? Kamel's or David's?
Let me get to your.
Which one?
On page,
Which one?
the very front page where it says budget book. Hey, Sophia, thanks for joining
That's
us.
Camille.
That's Kamel's. Okay.
Hey.
And I want to say hi to everybody in the chat room too. Paulette has joined us there. Thank you, Paulette. I wonder if that's the same Paulette that brought up the Veterans Day article that can't be posted on Facebook. I'm just going to sidetrack for 1
That
second
was
here.
frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, this was posted January 20th, 2015, and I know for a fact that this article has been in the
Yeah.
group.
I mean, this is
So, but I did post it here, and what we'll do is, if I don't know why Facebook is blocking us from sharing it, but what we can do is we can create just a small little sample. Pretty much, we just copy paste these first two sentences, blah blah blah, copy paste that, and add the actual link. So that way, if people want to read this for themselves, then they can go and read the whole document there. So Paulette wanted us to make sure that it was posted in the group, and if we have to mirror it, then we'll definitely do that and get that posted in there. Because when I searched for it in the group, it was not there, and I was like, okay, I know it's there. I was thinking, well, maybe it was just in the comments or something, which is possible. But I think this one has been posted in the group many times. So uh, I'm sure there was a good reason
Well,
why Paulette wanted it posted here.
it wouldn't even let us post it in Messenger, and
Right.
that was odd.
Correct. Right. I couldn't. Yeah. Somebody
And that's
else wanted to try to posting it too, and I tried to sending it to them, and I couldn't even send it to them in Messenger. It won't post on my personal Facebook wall, so I don't know what's going on.
and that's why I sent it to you through email, because I was like, we got to try to do something. It was a great article.
Yeah. We could probably copy and paste all the contents, maybe, and just put it in do that. I don't know. They might block that too, but just want to let people know about that. Um, so going back here to page 285, just some notes on the notepad, and I have a bunch of notes here where it says, okay, I tried to calculate all of the different pages that the notepad is on in this document here, so I will add those later on. Page 29 shows the chain of evidence, so I'm just going to jump to that. Item 41, 2 areas tested. Just want to say this. There were only 2 areas tested. 41-1, that is the cover, which I thought was very interesting, that the cover would be tested for blood, showing that the book was probably closed. Somebody flipped it open at some point. And then 41-2 is a page, and I'm not 100% sure what page that was, but I do think it was probably the page that said, open the rise now, submit to Allah. But there were only 2 pages here that were tested for blood, and there's multiple pages. Many pages have blood on it. This is item 41. The notepad is item 41, and it is part of the DNA test, the latent print test, and the question documents test. So it's part of 3 separate tests here, just to be clear. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. Whoops. Let's see. Let's go back up. Item 41. So, okay, item 41. So the chain of evidence, I think, was a good one. It just kind of shows, who got it when, who got what when, and when everything was put back. So by this, we can get some really good times and dates as to when everything was tested, where it moved from the BCA into the testing, and for whatever reason, they decided not to do any handwriting comparisons, which does bother me a lot. I'm sure it bothers you both too.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it does.
So that's 29. And of course, you have all of the different, from page 29 on, it goes down and shows you item 41A, item 41-1, -2, -3, all that good stuff. So this is where you can kind of see. This is what was kind of throwing me off here. So let's look at this. Item 41-1, it is a swabbing of the item notepad with handwriting on desk in office with apparent blood. So that item 41-2 is is one manila envelope containing a swabbing from the item, notepad with handwriting on desk in office with apparent blood. Right, and then where it says item 41A, now they're talking about each page. So where it's, item 41A-1 is page 1, item 41A-2 is page 2, etc., etc. These are just based on the 59 pages that they have. Go ahead. Okay. All right. I think that's pretty self-explanatory right here. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump down to page 53. Go ahead and feel free to jump in anytime if you guys want to. It's fine. Where are we at here? 53. Sorry. All right, 53. Looks like I need to adjust this here. All right, so page 53 just kind of shows what was tested, and that the notepad was going to be tested as part of the 3 documents. Check that off. Okay, page 58, there's another mention of the notepad, and I believe this is in regards to the ESDA lifts, which is the latent the impressions. So they found several pages, page 20 and page 21. On these 2 pages, there was nothing on them, but there was indented writing. So what they did, and we'll see that later, is they took those 2 pages, and they were basically able to see what was written. So obviously, this whatever was written must have been written on page before page 20, but it shows how deep the writing went on, let's say, page 19, maybe page 18, whatever it was, pages that were tossed out, notes that were tossed out. And those notes, we will see, those are tied to David's project. So the only curious thing that I kind of found about 41A-20 and 41A-21 is that because there were ESDA lifts here, it made me wonder if there were any other places that had ESDA lifts, or was this the only place here where David actually was writing so hard that it kind of leaked through the other 2 pages. So I got a little bit confused on that one, but we'll cover that one a little bit more too. Let's see here. Page 106 shows Joe Cooksley's notes. I think that's a good one. The notes can be very hard to actually read, just because because of his writing. And not to say my handwriting is any better at all, but this is another. Here we go. Let me see if I can go down here. So item 41, the notepad with writing on it with apparent blood. Flipped back 1 page and observed blood on it. So that cover does kind of, always struck me odd. It was like so they're saying David went into the office. He had this notepad that was closed, apparently. That's my guess. If there's blood on the cover, I don't know what else there could be. He flips it open and flips it to about maybe halfway through. It's about page 30, so about halfway through, and writes these 2 weird notes. And they don't do any testing. They don't do anything to prove that David actually wrote it. Why should we think that David did it? Let's go to page 186. Yeah. Page 186 here covers, this shows us the latent prints, what was tested for the latent prints. This thing jumps around a lot. I'm gonna have to get a new one here, but there we go. It's very sensitive. So this obviously goes through page 186 to 188, shows what they were looking for. This is all part of the latent print test. And you could clearly see 41, not too much there. The only thing that is really of relevance that they find that is not just a page, everything is just a page for the latent prints. I think that's about it, unless they skip to page 20. 21. No, those aren't even part of it. So we can go down to 189. And on 189, just get there. This is where we see the results of the latent prints. So we're going to skip down to the latent prints where it says 40. So let's see, item 41A-30, one latent impression, could be from a finger or palm designated as LP 41A30-1. And then item 41A-31 is one latent fingerprint designated as LP 41A31-1. These were the only two that were suitable for comparison. And what they found, we skip down here to the results, LP 41A30-1, that would be page 30. It was inconclusive to Crowley due to the limited quality and quantity of information in the latent and known prints. Okay, LP 41A31-1 was identified to the left middle finger of David Crowley. So they were able to tie David Crowley to page 31 for latent prints on his left middle finger. Thought that was interesting. Right. So they can put his left middle finger on page 31, if I'm reading this correctly. That's about it. Not even on the pen that they say wrote all this, but
and that goes back to my comment that I made a while ago, that this crime scene lacks fingerprints and DNA for this family. It should be everywhere. They lived in this house. They touched these things. They used these things. It should be there. But when they go to test it, it's not. I mean, they were both using this notebook. Their DNA should be all over it. Their fingerprints should be all over it. The pen, like you mentioned. Both. But it's just surprisingly lacking.
yeah. It is disturbing. Disturbing. But it gets worse, right? It gets a lot worse. Let me just go here. So looking at some of these notes, we're going to page 207 now. Page 207 through 210 is Jennifer Kostrowski's notes, dated 7/14/2015. And one interesting thing on this, if you look at where it says item 41, a lot of this is hard to read, but at the bottom here, I'm just going to put my little cursor to where I want people to kind of look. No visual RD, that's ridge detail, I believe, right? I had a lot of people help me with that one. So I was trying to figure what RD meant. Ridge detail makes the most sense, I would say. Let's see, but here's the interesting thing. It says a minimal possible apparent blood on cover. So looking at the cover, obviously I couldn't tell that there was any blood on it, but this shows there was blood on that cover, and I don't believe that blood was ever tested either. So there you go. Just another little tidbit there. But I wanted it to be very clear that they did find blood on that cover. So it wasn't like, the notepad was just open, and that's why there's probably blood on a lot of these pages. But it was purposely set on David's office, on the office desk for whatever reason. It was purposely set there, and I found that kind of, the whole thing, that just by itself looks staged. And that's a big thing. It was when people say, they talk about things being staged, you could totally see where they're coming from. Many things in this house, around this house, and even things that happen after, really made me really focus on the fact that for whatever reason, by whoever, this is staged. It's a staged crime scene. So anyways, let's see. Anything else? Anybody have anything else on that? I know Christy has also joined us here, so thank you, Christy, for joining and listening in, watching in, and go ahead and feel free here if you want to jump in at any time. We're almost to the actual notepad, the budget book. But I was just going through all of the notes, trying to find any pages that mention this notepad in this BCA 488-page document. This can be a lot of homework because there is a lot of stuff here. And what I'm finding again is going through this over and over has helped me to get some clarification on a lot of these questions that I still have here. All right, so the question documents, we're now skipping to page 214 through 218 is the question documents. This mentions that the handwriting comparisons were not done. You can look at this date too, 6/30/2015. The dates are so important in this case because you can see when they start accusing David and when they actually do their job and when they actually, find that these tests are done. So had they have waited, instead of telling everybody David was guilty within 24 hours, had they have waited, maybe they wouldn't, have this big problem that they have now, which is not being able to prove their own case. So let's skip down here. 41A. So these are just go ahead, Justin.
I'm sorry. So I've noticed that we've been going up over everything that Apple Valley Police Department has and how they've conducted this investigation. Do you think it would be a good idea to find a successful investigation done by another department with a situation very similar to this one, so we can see how a different department would go over everything and what they would include?
Absolutely. I know Sophia had tried. She tried to get that from Apple Valley. And Sophia, you want to tell us a little bit about that case and what you found there?
Well, I did get another murder-suicide because this case was labeled murder-suicide. I wanted to compare, and all I got were photographs and a police report. I asked for the autopsy reports and the BCA lab reports, and I was told that the autopsy reports were not released to the public, and BCA labs were never done.
So you think it's a question of competency of AVPD, or
Possibly.
If we were to find another department, do you think it would be good to find one in Minnesota, another local one, or you think maybe another one out of state? Or finding one is going to be a little homework in and of itself.
I don't know, to be honest. I've never really stepped into this realm before. Like in Houston, for instance, they have plenty of, I'm sure they have just stacks and stacks of paperwork, and they have a really good crime lab. So I really wouldn't know, but it's worth a shot. I could always submit a FOIA and see what I can get.
That would be good. Yeah, anything like that, anything you could do to help with that, I think would be great because I don't think all I don't think all police, all investigators would make a mistake, would make so many mistakes as we're finding here. I would hope not.
Just all the inconclusive testing that they have, it just leaves so much room for outside actors to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is the reason why we're here.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's like unknowns found in the DNA that was never followed up. There could have been tests ran to see if it was anybody from the investigation team or anybody, like any lab mistakes. There would have been gosh, I cannot remember the actual name of the testing process, but there's like a log that they would go through and they would mark out. And this is exactly why I requested this information from the BCA, this file. And even in this file, I didn't get what I requested. But it was unexpected results log is what I was trying to get to see how they could, if they ruled out the unknown DNA that was found in, I think it was 3 or 4 of the test results. And they didn't show, or they didn't send the information where they showed that they looked further into those results.
Hmm.
And it's very, I mean, by law, they're supposed to do that. When asked by an outside source, they're supposed to send that log.
Why?
Because they received federal money.
And I mean, how do we hold them accountable for things like that? I think that's kind of been another stressful thought of mine is like, how do you hold accountable? Who do we hold accountable? And do they just feel like they don't have to worry about that because nobody's gonna care in a couple weeks, which is pretty much what happened with this
Well,
case.
it's kind of like
Go ahead.
it's kind of like the situation that minority groups, especially blacks, were the situation they were in the South during the time of Jim Crow. A police officer had so much power in the minority parts of town, but we're still in the same situation today because we don't have a lot of the knowledge to hold police accountable on a lot of these things, especially in a case such as this. I mean, who's going to hold them accountable? You certainly don't see forensic students going in and studying this case. They all think it's just cut and dry and is done. So I mean, they have a lot of power, and indifference is their main weapon.
And this is
So
why I
long as
think that
everybody,
an attorney would come into play for us. Because an attorney would say, hey, we're asking for these FOIAs. We're asking for this information through the Freedom of the Information Act, and you are picking and choosing what we receive. And by law, I specifically sent FOIAs with certain information, and I have yet to receive the items that I specifically requested. An attorney would follow through with that legally.
I'm pretty sure once you put the pressure on like that, you'll probably get something along the lines, "Oh, we lost it," or that's government right there to a T. When it comes time for somebody to be held accountable, burn the books, shred everything.
And say we're sorry.
I'd hate to say it though, but I've seen that firsthand here in the Army. Sometimes that's how some of our departments in the government, especially in the Department of the Army and the Department of Defense, that's how they do things. I mean, we've had billions and billions of dollars go missing in the Pentagon. Nobody can account for it. And when they try to get the records, there's nothing there. It's like it never existed.
When I was leaving the Air Force, I was told to make 3 copies of my medical records.
Oh, yes.
And I did, thankfully. My ex, when he left the Air Force, he didn't do that. And he's still fighting the VA for information, or for the benefits he deserves.
Because they tell him it's not service related.
Yeah, they're saying, well, your medical records from the military were lost, or something like that along those lines. And we couldn't even get my daughter's medical records because, once again, he didn't do it. And so she had to get all her immunizations again before she could start school.
Gosh dang.
And yeah, I was kind of furious about that.
That just shows you what we're up against, though. So, in every passing year, I'm sure they start shedding more and more bits of evidence. So,
That's right.
So make sure if you're in the military, get 3 copies of your medical records before you leave.
I got them all stashed away somewhere. I just hope they're still intact when I go for them.
Yeah. They don't want to come.
Right.
You don't want them to come up missing.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
the inconclusive DNA is kind of a reoccurring theme in this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've only been following this whole thing for probably about 4 months now.
Yeah, it is.
I think it was inconclusive fingerprints, inconclusive. Well, some of the tests were. It either came back as David and Camille, David and just plain David, just regular Camille, and it would rule out Rainey and David, but then there would be other unknown DNA in there too.
Correct.
And so you're kind of wondering, okay, what's that unknown DNA then? And it would say 2 to 3 unknown profiles.
That's right.
Did any of the forensic reports mention anything about what they used as a template? Something that they knew was positively David, Rihanna, and Kamel's DNA.
They took vials of blood from all the bodies removed from the house during the time of the autopsy, and that's what they used as to test against the samples. Does that answer your question?
I mean, yes, but it would just seem to me like that would leave so much wiggle room for an outside actor if they
Right.
just took it from the crime scene of who was there. Because did they ever do anything with dental records?
Yes. The radiographs,
Okay.
right? They did radiographs later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But that was the big thing, because I was like, wait a minute. When I first learned that, I was like, well, why would they take? I mean, is that standard to take the blood off of the bodies there? Because the big problem is that they're saying that the bodies were so bad that they could not recognize who they were. So why would they just take that and then take the blood from them? I was hoping that they used outside blood, blood from, I don't know, somewhere else maybe. I have no idea where they would get it or how all of that stuff works. But to just take it from the scene, I thought was that made me a little nervous about, well, you guys don't even know that these are those 3 bodies. And
Well, I mean, the house had hairbrushes, had toothbrushes. There could have been other samples to
That's
use
true.
along with the blood from the bodies.
right.
They just took the vials.
Yeah, so I'm glad that they didn't just identify them by the blood, that they did use radiographs to identify them. But only David and Kamel were identified. Rania was not. Her identification, I believe, was circumstantial or something like that.
Yeah, correct.
So that's weird too. I don't like that. That's another.
I imagine
Interesting.
with being in a pediatric stage of life, she's probably only been to the doctor a few times, and I don't even know if they test. I don't even know if it's in what's the word I'm looking for? If it's standard practice to sample blood from a child that young.
Yeah, good question.
But I know David, since he was in the Army, the DOD still probably has his DNA on file somewhere, because they have mine. I think
And
they
I know
started
mine.
doing that. Yeah, pretty much anybody who's ever served in the DOD has their DNA taken up, and so it just kind of I don't think I've seen anywhere mentioned in any of the releases from AVPD where they contacted the DoD for David's DNA sample.
And I have a question. Um, when Camille and her family emigrated to the United States, don't doesn't the State Department take samples,
I wouldn't know.
or is that just a more recent thing?
That's a good question. I don't know how that works. Is that like like a immigration question
Mhm.
type thing or something? Because we know how bad that is, especially in
Yeah.
well, they went to Texas. I don't know. I don't know how it is in Texas. In California, it's like, yeah, it's not even worth it. They don't do anything. They just let you in. Worry about it later.
I think probably it would depend on when they immigrated as well, because I know our entry requirements and the tests they do as far as like health of people coming in, making sure they have shots before they are introduced to the U.S. population. I'm pretty sure ever since 9/11, those standards have increased probably double or triple fold. So whenever they came in, I'm sure that would determine what kind of medical tests and requirements they had set before them too.
They came here when they moved from Pakistan to Texas when Kamel was 17, and she was 29 when she was killed. So I have to do a little math there, but I don't know if maybe it's different for underage as a part, as opposed to overage or not. I'm not sure. That is a
Yeah, they
really
came
good
in after
question.
9/11.
Yeah.
It says DNA was collected since 1995 as part of the DNA process. I mean, as part of the immigration process to become a
Hmm.
citizen.
So so DHS did have Kamel's DNA on record.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Very possible.
Unless it got lost.
Oops. And they would definitely have David's, right? Just because he served. They'd have.
Oh, oh yes.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there would be multiple government hospitals that have his DNA. Where he took basic over, Fort Benning would have it,
Mhm.
which is Martin Army Hospital. And he was stationed at Fort Hood. I don't remember the hospital name there, but they would have it as well. And I'm not sure if he would have gotten one taken before deployment. I had blood taken before deployment, so I don't really know how that works. So there would be, I don't know what that would fall under, if that would fall under the hospital or if that would fall under mobilization command for Fort Hood. So it really depends.
They also take a sample in MEPS.
Maps, yes. See, I don't remember where he was living. I think he was in Minnesota. Uh,
Hey, give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Hmm.
So definitely Apple Valley Police Department would still have those samples on file, wouldn't they?
Yes, the untested samples they still have. The BCA has it.
Hmm. We could convince
Okay, let
somebody.
me.
I'm sorry.
Um, as of last year, they still had them. Whether they do now, that's a different story.
If we could get somebody that has a federal clearance, I'm sure they could go in and reopen those
That would be amazing.
because we don't know what further testing outside of this BCA they've done. I haven't
True.
myself. I haven't combed deep enough to find out whether or not they've actually tried to compare it to any other sample of DNA outside of the crime scene, like for instance,
Mm-mm.
Department of Homeland Security, DoD, or any other hospitals.
They didn't run it through CODIS or anything.
Hmm. Strange.
That was one of the reasons I think why one of the early theories was that they had faked their own death. Partially, partially because, well, how do people identify them? Like, how does the neighbor identify who they are when the bodies were so badly decomposed and ravaged, apparently by the dog, that nobody could really identify who they were. So, just things like that, the way that David's friends and family kind of were acting, just trying to keep the case closed, to keep everything shut out, and um, lots of interesting things like that. But right now, I don't believe that they fake their death. But it's an interesting theory. I found that theory very interesting for many reasons.
Um, yes, and you bring that up. If they didn't fake their death, which I mean, it's fairly it's very probable that they. I mean, what's the word? It's very unlikely that they would do such a thing, but it is possible that someone else could have faked their death. I think I brought it up before. Like the NKVD in the Soviet Union would sometimes do that to make high-profile people disappear, and they would never see the person ever again, though. But they wouldn't die in their home. They would go somewhere else and never be seen or heard from ever again.
Right. Which is a
So
very
it's
scary. That's scary.
oh, oh yes,
Mhm.
more scary than a murder suicide like this.
That reminds me of what was that guy's name? Howard. What's the guy's name? I can't remember his name. The famous aviator guy. I want to say Howard Hunt, but that's not right.
Hughes,
Howard
Howard
Hughes.
Hughes.
Howard Hughes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Howard Hughes.
Hey, Christy. How are you?
This is Christy.
Thanks for joining us here. Thanks for
Hey
helping.
there. Hey.
Yeah, Howard Hughes. That was it. That was one of the things, because
Yeah.
that guy had faked his death. The other case we were looking into was the Philip Marshall case, and there was another strong theory that he had faked his death as well. Of course, I've been researching Bruce Lee, and they said that he faked his death. Elvis faked his death. Apparently, everybody's faking their death and living as slaves on some foreign island or something. But that's like fantasy stuff. But it did
The
fascinate
Epstein
me.
Island.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, right.
Well, look,
Oh boy.
the other weird thing about identifying, I mean, even if they don't have DNA, the question that I ask is, even if a hand is partially mummified, they can rehydrate the fingerprints. They can actually take like a layer of it off and put it on their own finger. They can rehydrate it and then do prints on paper with it. I was looking into that, so I don't know why they didn't even attempt to rehydrate or mention that they tried to rehydrate his fingers so that they could get decent prints for him.
Could that be a budgeting issue, maybe? Could it
I don't
be?
know, or maybe if they just didn't have the knowledge or technology to do it. But I do know that, because I have researched it, and I do know that it's not just some CSI thing that you see on TV or something, that it is something that they can do, and
Wow.
it's actually pretty simple. It's a
Really?
pretty simple process, yeah. So I'm not quite sure why they didn't even attempt to do it or mention doing it. But I have other questions. I mean, I was talking to Sophia about that, about like why they didn't go into more detail on the missing limbs. Why? Because, I mean, like, one reason why that there could possibly be an explanation of lack of blood is because if a limb or something is cut off, but if it's severed, but if it's jagged and it's not clean, the vein tends to roll in on itself, and it almost causes its own tourniquet type thing. I mean, you still bleed, but it slows the bleeding. It's just something that happens, rather than if it's a very clean cut, it doesn't roll like that, and then you produce a lot more blood. And so I was wondering why they didn't go into more detail on, was it jagged, was it clean, and because the reason why I wonder why they didn't go into more detail about it is because Kamel's hands were apparently her arms were under her body and her hands were missing. So why they didn't go into more detail to explain how that was possible, I question.
Absolutely. Great. That's a great question. It really is.
Didn't they chalk all that up to paleontology, referring
Yes.
to how the dog pretty much just discarded everything?
Yeah, pretty much. That was it. He gets credit for everything. So.
Mhm. Oh, we don't have an answer for that? Paleo did it. Christy, will you explain the safety thing about the gun safety?
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with that particular gun, and on the gun there is a pistol grip safety. So it's like a lever that's on the grip, and in order for you to fire it, you have to engage that. So you have to butt your hand up against that and have that engaged in order to fire the weapon. And there's also a trigger safety on it as well. So you have to really depress the trigger, and then when there's like this little lever that's within the trigger that's kind of like a safety that pushes in when you pull on the trigger. So it's kind of like a squeezing motion. And so for him to be found with his arms, both of them stretched out completely to both sides, it would be almost impossible, because the only way for his right arm to be stretched out the way it was, because okay, if it's the way that the examiner's report says, the examiner's report says that he has an exit wound on the left side of his head. So that would mean that he would have to be shot from the right side of his head. So for his right arm to be completely stretched out, he would have to take his left hand and put his hand on that gun, and he would have to stretch his hand around to the right side of his head and really reach around and then fire it. And for his hand to come back and land in a completely outstretched position, I mean, I've researched like how guns fall when people commit suicide, and how the positioning of the body and stuff like that. So I mean, the only way for his arms to be completely stretched out is if he shot himself lying down. And it's almost, I tried doing it, and it's very, very, very difficult. I mean, it doesn't make any sense why anyone would do that, to try and reach around and completely press that safety on the grip. And he was right-handed. So that makes absolutely no sense at all.
Wow.
I'm thinking there would probably be easier ways to commit suicide than doing it that way.
Mm-hmm. And I was reading someone that went to a lot of suicides. They were an investigator that did a lot of suicides. And they said more commonly if someone is standing up, and they shoot themselves, the most common thing that they find is for the gun to actually be under the body or close to near under the body. Because when the person shoots themselves, the gun falls first, then they fall.
Interesting. That's what happened with Philip Marshall. The gun was actually found underneath him, which is why they had a hard time connecting the gun to Philip Marshall because there was so much blood there. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of times they won't even be able to find it, so they go in and they initially, think it's a homicide, and then they find the gun, and then they determine it to be a suicide. So it's kind of the reverse of that other article that I shared that talked about people going in and automatically assuming it was a suicide. But the only possible way for him to have ended up in the position that he was in would have been for him to be completely laying down.
Wow.
And reach around and shoot himself. Because if he was sitting up, he would fall back and the gun would fall first and he would fall back. And the likelihood of his arm landing completely stretched out the odds are astronomical for his arms to be out the way they are. That is just weird.
And if he was laying completely down like that, with the exit wound, that bullet would not have been in the attic.
Mm-mm. No, because he would have had to even reach further around, and he would have had to really reach around and shoot himself more to the right-hand side, more towards the back, in order for the bullet to exit in an upward angle going up into the ceiling.
Wow.
And did they even bother? And here's the other question I have. After the mysterious bullet was found later, did they even bother to go back and look at where his body actually was and do use lasers or anything like that to see if the trajectory was right?
I don't think so. I mean, you have to remember at that point they had thought that they weren't even looking for that bullet. So I think that was like a minimal anything connected to item 57, the bullet that was found in the attic, is very minimal. So unless they did that stuff and we just haven't received it, I don't think that they spent a whole lot of time on that on item 57 on trying to figure out, okay, David was shot here, okay, Kamel was shot here, she was standing here, she was sitting there. But if you talk to certain people, they will try to tell you where David was, where Kamel was. So are they making it up? Are they guessing? Or is this something that they were told by investigators? And that still, to me, is not clear based on the documents that we have so far.
Yeah, I mean, and the only way to determine whether that was actually the bullet, especially with it not having any blood or brain matter or anything on it, the only way to really connect it would be to logically deduce by using the lasers and everything and going, okay, this is where he was sitting, to even see if it was remotely possible. But,
Right.
I mean, if you look at where his feet were, next to the couch, I mean, it's a very strange position. Like, okay, if you hypothesize that he was standing, that would be a weird place to be standing and shoot yourself. I mean,
Right.
You wouldn't cram yourself up against the couch. Okay, would he sit there like that? Okay, if he sat up and did it, though, what are the odds of both of his arms landing outstretched like that?
Right.
I think it's a staging that has something to do with mocking Christianity, in my opinion.
And some people have even said that Paleo could have outstretched his hands. I've seen the comments.
I mean,
They're
that's
perfectly stretched out, though. I mean,
yeah, they are. They really are.
Yeah,
It's the crucifix position.
I mean, they're completely even. I mean, for him to have done that, he would have had to done both arms at the perfect time when there was no rigor mortis. And, more than likely, if he messed with them, it would have been right around when the incident happened, because when I was reading about animal scavenging, the main reason why dogs will scavenge their owners is because they get freaked out and upset, especially if it's a gunshot, and they can't wake their owner up, so they start licking them and stuff, trying to wake them up. And then once they taste that blood is when they start scavenging. It's just some kind of switch that gets flipped. So he would have had to have done it like both arms at the perfect time.
That is disturbing. But it's, it's something we have to look at. It's something we have to go there. That's hard for me. It's hard to, I mean, it's the saddest thing when you think about a pet, which for most people is part of their family. And the fact that there was a dog in there, what they say, for 3 weeks, which I mean, that's hard to really buy. But for 3 weeks by itself, that's a long time. 1 or 2 days is a long time. 3 weeks is just crazy, and for them to just accept it, that this is what happened, that's very curious to me too. How quickly everything just kind of fell into place when here.
And that's why
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why I find it interesting that there wasn't more descriptive, terminology on the missing hands and the missing arm. I mean, because that really makes a difference. I mean, if you look at sample autopsies, you can go on the internet and you can get on these sites that are for students, forensic students, and you can look at autopsy reports, and those reports are so lacking in detail, it's not even funny. And for something so gruesome, for them to not explain it, to not describe it, to validate that is indeed what happened, I find it strange for them to not say, okay, it was jagged, so therefore we do believe it's animal scavenging because there were jagged edges. This is what it looked like. Usually they give more detailed information of what, because they will, they'll speak into a recorder when they're doing it, and they'll state what they're finding. Okay, this is what I'm finding. I'm finding, a missing hand. The wrist appears to have jagged edges, or it appears to have clean edges. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And there's nothing.
Well,
nothing
jagged edges.
describing that.
Well, the jagged edges are mentioned in the autopsies.
They are?
They are. Yes, they
Oh,
are.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see that.
It's very brief, but it is mentioned in there. I don't believe it's mentioned for all three. But I do believe that there was, I know that there was at least one or two mentions about jagged edges like that, which is one of the reasons why I didn't think that any of the hands were cut off or anything like that.
Yeah, because
Um,
they would be clean.
yeah, they would be straight. They'd be,
But
but
and that's the other thing though, is I did notice that as well, is like one autopsy would have more detail about something, and another one wouldn't have the same amount of detail.
right.
It,
Was
I mean, it was interesting.
was there one that stuck out more to you, that had more or had less, that you can think of?
Kamel's was the most detailed.
Mhm.
Hers
And
was the
David and
longest
Rania,
and the most detailed.
where we compared Rania's autopsy to like John Bonet's autopsy, and it was surprisingly lacking.
Wow.
Very.
That's disturbing.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, sir.
I found a pretty good article from this website called ResearchGate.net, and they have a case study in there of a gentleman. I believe he lived in Indonesia or Sri Lanka, and he had about, let's see, I don't know how long it was. So the body was there for about 46 days. The body was dead for about 4 to 6 days. And they were 15 dogs living in the house with this gentleman, 4 puppies, 4 medium-sized male dogs, and I believe a bunch of other smaller dogs. Um, the only extremity that the gentleman had missing was his left arm, and his other hand was still intact, even though there was all those animals there. So it's just a good comparison.
Yeah, I'm pulling that up here for everybody if
Mhm.
they can look at that. And
The
we'll.
images are
Mhm.
straight to the point, though, so I do apologize for that.
Oh, are there images in here? Okay.
There are, but I would imagine that the case here was probably in about the same stage of decomposition as Kamel and David were. Um,
Oh my goodness, these are very disturbing
Well,
images.
being that this was in a tropical climate, he decomposed a lot. The subject decomposed, or the female rather, the lady, she decomposed at a lot faster rate due to the humidity and heat.
Wow.
Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah. The bloating.
That is
yeah,
disturbing.
I'll see if I can share this in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, please do. Please do. You might have to exclude like the HTTP or something, but I'll add this to the description later. So people, if they want to go and look at that, just make sure you're not having lunch or anything, because it's very disturbing.
And the thing is that David and Rainey still had all their toes.
Yeah.
Well, the subject here, all of her extremities except right um, her right hand were bitten at. So her toes were nibbled at on both feet, and her left hand was completely missing.
Wow.
Did the dog go for the skull and the neck?
I haven't got to that part. I haven't read that far into the report yet. I was reading more or
Oh,
less on
that's
the.
disturbing,
It's
Greg.
very I know. I'm sorry. All right. That's enough of that. But uh, just for the images. But yeah. But that's interesting.
But the thing that's
Mm.
still weird, that doesn't make any sense, unless Kamel's body was moved, there's no way that her hands were eaten post mortem by the dog because her arms were underneath her body. I mean, it clearly states that.
There's one arm. One arm was underneath her body. The other was like over her head, kind of.
So the only way that would have
But it
happened was
doesn't.
if Paleo like turned into a drill and was able to bore through her entire abdominal cavity to get to that hand,
Yeah.
which he
Which
didn't.
that would not have been easy for him, where the bodies were and how close David's body was to his wife's. Yeah, it's not an easy. Getting to her would not be easy for him. So it'd be a lot easier for him to get to the other two victims.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me as well, because it looks like, where her pants are torn, like maybe he attempted to wake her up or attempted to scavenge or whatever, but gave up because her pants are just torn. So I found that interesting too, that there wasn't I didn't see any damage anyway, but the pants were just torn.
Yeah.
That could be a result of, like you said, Paleo attempting to get her attention, or it could be a result of the bloating. Because a person who is bloating, their body swells to about 3 or 4 times. I wouldn't say that much. I'd say it's safer to say about 2 times more than what they wider than what they were. So somebody who generally has a 28-inch waist would probably be about a 38-inch waist or 40-inch waist at the state of decomposition that they were in.
Anything else on the animal scavenging here, or else we'll get back to the notepad. That's a good article here. I want to make sure people, if you do want to read this here, this case study, post it on researchgate.net. And thank you, Justin, for finding that and for posting that. I will be reading through this very thoroughly later on. I've been looking for things like this, and things like this are a lot better than some of the other articles that I've seen. Just put it like that.
Sad that we have to resort to such gruesome information, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is. Yep. It's all part of the process.
I mean, we do understand that animals will scavenge. We understand that. But do they scavenge to the point that Paleo did in this case?
Right. And if they do,
Too,
in this test or in this PDF, Justin, one of the things I'm going to be looking for is did they do any tests to the dog? Did they, if the dog, a lot of these articles that I'm reading, they never really mention when it's animal scavenging. Shouldn't the first thing that they should do is to test the dog feces?
I haven't seen anything like that in the BCA, which I've only been through parts of it. But as far as I've gone through, I haven't seen any kind of test done on Paleo or any of the fecal material he left behind. Because I would imagine there would be certain like calcium deposits from bone that he himself would not be able to digest.
Something. Should be something, and there's nothing. There's nothing in there.
Those bones went somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And the search warrants allow for his fecal matter to be collected and tested if need be.
Oh, really? Oh, I missed that.
Yeah. Yeah,
oh, I
it's
totally
in there.
missed that. You'll have to send me that later. I missed that part.
Okay.
That's great, because I do need to follow up now that Detective Gummert is back. I have not followed up with him yet, and that is the only thing that I really want to follow up with him on, aside from some of the documents that we didn't get, that I know that we didn't get.
Which begs the question, did they recover Paleo's fecal material, or did they throw it in the trash?
Good question. Whatever happened with it? Yeah.
I didn't see any mention of it being collected in the
It's not in the
samples.
evidence. No.
And I'm just
You were
saying
one.
it could have been. They legally could have done it.
Right. Right. Which is, and if they put that into the search warrant, that makes me think that somebody was already thinking that, and that's common sense. So it's just kind of frustrating that we
Mm-hmm.
don't have a clear answer on that yet. So
The forces of oversight may have expressed a wish to not go into such depth.
right.
Oh.
That's my fear. That's my fear right there. That along with so many other things, including the handwriting, they were like, no, we don't need to go there because why would they? They've already got their man. They've got their case. They've got everything. They have someone in the 911 call already talking about how the dogs scavenge these bodies. I mean, that's before the police even showed up on scene. And Judy Prochnow is pretty much laying out the whole story that we're going to hear for the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, and the other thing, I mean, say animal scavenging is what happened. Still, they did not go into any kind of detail or explanation of why they thought that the gun was by his left hand, and yet they said that the exit wound is on the left hand side of his head. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense.
Yes, I've never seen any kind of anything like this with so many holes in it.
Only cheese.
I mean, you would think they would go into trying to make some kind of logic or explanation. Say, okay, this is what happened. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because we found the gun by his left hand, but the exit wound's on the left hand side of his head. So this is what we think how he did this. But they didn't, and it does not seem possible because, I mean, I was even reading about calibers of bullets and different types of bullets and everything to make sure that I knew, what my thinking was correct. And those hollow point bullets, when they enter, they are so violent. It's almost like your inside of your brain is shaken around because there's just like this. I mean, it leaves just this wide path of damage, and it reverberates, back and forth. So there's no way he could have still been holding onto the gun and said, okay, I'm going to lay my arm out this way, and now I'm going to die. Because that's not what happens. You get shot in the head with a 40 caliber hollow point, you're out. You're done.
It's just like a video of treasurer. I think his name was Bud Dwyer. He was the treasurer for the state of Illinois back in the 1970s, and he was convicted of corruption. And in order to secure his wife and children's future, he shot himself so that they could get his death benefit. When he put that 350, he put the 357 under his chin. And as soon as he pulled it, he was out like a clock. He just fell like a top. There was no twitching or anything like that. The only thing that was going on was blood from his head was flowing like a faucet.
Wow.
Which the blood stains kind of don't reflect that.
And what happens? That's what I was reading about. That this guy said that he was explaining in this article is that what happens when you get shot in the head, all of your cognitive processing, everything stops. Therefore, that means your muscle control stops. So the first thing that happens is the gun falls out of your hand because you can't grip anymore. The only time they ever find weapons still in someone's hand is if it's a very low caliber bullet, and that's very rare. It can happen, but with that caliber, with a hollow point, it's not possible. And so it just seems convenient where that gun was and the way his arms are and where the way he's laying.
Very much true, yes. Very much truth to that. Yeah. You wanted to get back to the handwriting?
Yeah.
Greg?
Yeah, let's go back to the notepad. Here we're still on page 214 through 218. I think it's worth noting if anybody wants to, this is the BCA 488 page PDF that I got, that Sophia also got at the same time. And if any researchers are out there that are questioning this case, I think this is a good document for you to go through when you have time. I think there is a lot of stuff here. I do hope one day we can take all of the documents that we have and kind of separate them, because what they did is the BCA just kind of data dumped everything. So it's nice to have that data dump and to get it out there, but it would be nice one day to actually put all of these into their own PDFs to make it even easier for future researchers to find this stuff. So still looking here at page 215, this is where we note the 2 ESDA lifts taken of impressions found on the front side of page 20 and on the front side of page 21. So then the main thing about this section here, page 214 through 218, is what happens at the very, very end. And the fact that ESDA lift impressions are only on these 2 pages. They're not noted anywhere else. So that is also an interesting thing. When I write, and I do write on paper, I press down, especially if I want to make a point, if I'm really in that moment, I press down harder. And so I used to have this problem when I bought cheap paper, was that I would press down so hard that the impressions would actually they would be indented into the next couple pages. So that's what happened here. I'm just wondering why the ESDA was only on those 2 pages and not on any of the other ones. So that was a little bit frustrating. But the main thing in this section here, and I'm going to skip down, I think it's page 218. So let's go down there. Oh no, we're going to page 216, and the results of the handwriting examinations, which was very frustrating. And it says that the handwriting comparisons of the question writings on item 41A-30, which is where David allegedly wrote, "Submit to Allah, open the rise," and the question writings in the photograph saved to the CD submitted as item 55 to the known non-request writing submitted as item 46, 47, and 48 will not be conducted at this time. What they're saying is they're not going to do the handwriting. They're basically not going to find out who wrote this, and it makes no sense. If you're going to do one thing regarding handwriting, it should be on proving that David actually wrote that David actually wrote, "Submit to Allah, open the rise now." If they don't do that, I don't understand. First of all, I don't understand why they wouldn't do it. You have people asking, if this should be done, there was a question. For some reason, someone at some level said, no, this doesn't need to be done. And that frustrates me. So if that's not going to be done by the AVPD or by investigators, maybe we have enough samples, enough things that we can hire somebody who can do those handwriting tests and who can, give us some clear view on whether David did write that. I mean, that's a big question now because there's no proof that David wrote that. So I think it will be very interesting in the next coming days. But that was the main thing about page 214 through 218. And then they go through on page 217, the ESDA indented writings. This is what they find. So starting with TYP Cal Army Strength, this is what David had written, or somebody had written on that notepad that was taken out. So for whatever reason, this page here, this writing here, was not in that notepad when the police entered the house, but at some point it was used for this. And what I find very frustrating is anything dealing with the military, anything like that, those pages are all here. They're very clear to make sure that they include those. Anything that, and this to me, if you read this page 217, this looks like a scene from David's film or from his TV series, and he's just writing out certain things, writing out maybe scenes. I don't know what exactly, but they make sure to put this in here. They make sure to put things like this in here, and it's almost like there's like this anti-military thing that is going on in this case, trying to make soldiers look crazy. And that's another frustrating thing that I find is when they try to make soldiers look crazy, because that bothers me, because soldiers are not crazy, first of all. They can go crazy, sure, just like anybody else could go crazy, but the narrative here, and you see it, is a former army soldier killed his wife and killed his daughter and killed himself. Now at the same time, this was really more back in around 2012 is when they were really trying to make soldiers look crazy. They were really trying to make it seem like any soldier who came back from fighting in Iraq or in Afghanistan, they had mental issues, they had PTSD, they had problems, and blah blah blah. And so they kind of jumped the gun on that one, I thought. Let's go down.
You would
here.
think with them taking those impressions that they would find more things written that were more or less benign.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, like you said, it's just all really, they just picked up all the juicy stuff.
Yeah, anything that might help them show David is crazy. Go ahead.
And it's really strange too that they basically diagnosed him after he was dead. I mean,
True.
To diagnose someone, a therapist or a psychiatrist has to sit down with you and ask you specific questions and look at your body language and, go into, a lot of detail discussing things with you. They can't diagnose someone based off of hearsay, because hearsay is subjective. So the person diagnosing him, they're influenced by what other people, what their perception of what he was doing and behaving and thinking. And that's just ridiculous, because they had disconnected from people and certain people had their own ideas why they disconnected that may not necessarily have been their reasons for disconnecting. So
Right.
all of this is based off of subjective information, and you can't diagnose someone that way.
Well, and it really it's a formula we've seen before. Well, this is actually after the case, but I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with Stephen Paddock, the gentleman who shot up the concert in Las Vegas. So he's a rich man, and he's got all kinds of Filipino women all over him. So he's not possibly wanting for anything. He's having a good time in Vegas, living any middle-aged man's life dream. And the government wants to say that he converted to Islam and he pledged allegiance to ISIS, and then he shot up a concert with a bump stock with a 5.56 rifle rounds, and it's inconclusive to me because the way those weapons were firing. I'm a soldier, so I know what certain weapons sound like because that's what I do for a living. It sounded like he had if the gunshots that were coming from there were a completely different weapon. But that's beside the point. So what it seems like the media and the government, whoever it does, I'm not saying it's the government, but you never know. They completely take out any kind of credibility of the supposed actor. So for this is David. Say he committed to Islam, writing "Submit to Allah now" and then "Allahu Akbar" on the wall. Somebody who's raised a Christian who would have seemingly no reason to convert to Islam, and then they try to make him crazy after death. And what they did with Stephen is they interviewed his brother Eric, and Eric is a complete nutcase. At least he was when CNN interviewed him. So they completely destroyed. Why would they want to destroy his credibility after he's dead? He's dead. It doesn't matter. The man's dead, unless there's some other purpose they're trying to serve with that. Yeah, I droned on for a little while. I do apologize.
Well, I mean, they were filming a grave state, or the grave state. What was it called again, the documentary? Was it the grave state or a grave state?
A grave state.
Thank you. They were filming that before the election. And Hillary was supposed to win. She would have taken up Obama's stance on gun control. I mean,
right.
This documentary could have very well have been a gateway to all types of red flag laws.
As well as many popular movements and uprisings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at all the things that this movie touched on. Conspiracy theories, all types of conspiracy theories. Alt-right wing, libertarians, veterans, PTSD, interracial marriages. I mean, just all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Drastic change in appearance.
One thing that I was actually talking to Sophia about was, like in the documentary or whatever you want to call it, when she is talking about that dream she had, and she actually says, I don't know if I'm going crazy or what. Well, crazy people don't question if they're crazy. Crazy people don't know they're crazy.
Good point.
So her questioning her sanity because of what was going on with her shows me that she was sane.
Thank you for bringing that up.
That's a great point. I never thought of that, actually. That's a really great point. Yeah, I've never known a crazy person that thinks that they're crazy, usually.
Exactly. I mean, if you're schizophrenic and you think you're Jesus, you think you're Jesus. And that's your reality. I mean, you really believe it. and there's no convincing you otherwise. You know, I mean, that's just how it is with people that are mentally ill. You know, psychotic people, you know, like the men that go crazy and kill their wives or whatever because they just are certain that they're cheating on them or something. Because they are just paranoid, and you know, but they never go, okay, am I crazy? Am I wrong? I mean, they don't question it. They don't stop. They're the ones that are irrational.
I mean, if somebody is getting supportive care, they can be convinced, but left to their own devices, you know, like you said, they'll revert back to their previous state.
Mhm.
Great point.
Yeah, but neither one of them had any history of mental illness. So that's why I question why they were just deemed to be, you know, kind of not with it.
The only thing I can think of for that is that it's tied into to the context, to the content of Gray State, of the government taking over and we're losing our rights, and that's really it. So people who don't think that that stuff is true, who already think anyone who thinks like that is crazy. Of course, they're going to look at this and say, "Oh, well, he was just another one of those guys, just another one of those
Mhm.
crazy people who was looking into this stuff." But that's funny.
But that doesn't make you a person homicidal, even if they have those thoughts. You know what I mean?
Correct.
It doesn't. I mean, for him to just. I mean, for him to just suddenly become homicidal, and suicidal, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and to not make it so clear, right? I mean, to write 3 different notes in 3 rooms, to leave so many questions to the point where the police can't find the bullet that is tied to him. There's just so many things like that are just like, no. No.
Especially since he himself described himself as a storyteller.
Right.
And so with him being a storyteller and being as descriptive as he was, he would have left something more in depth and something, you know, to at least like make people stop and think about something or about what happened. You know, he would give a reasoning and there would be purpose to it, because it seems like everything that he did, there was purpose in every action that he took.
Yeah, and I don't
envision
think. Go ahead, Sophia.
Well, I envision a recorded statement at least from him.
Yeah, because he videotaped everything.
If not, then a detailed suicide note of why he did it. But we don't have either.
And I don't think he would be working on Gray State, working on this project, connecting people, contacting people, if, as late as December 16th, December 17th, I don't think he would be doing that if he was planning on killing himself or if he was planning on killing his family or anything like that. And so that's one of the biggest things that people have kind of, because when this first happened and Jordan Page brought up David's $30 million deal, man, it was like, all these people were trying to tell us that there was no deal, right? That was the big thing. And maybe they didn't know, but obviously there was, and David was working towards Gray State and making this into a Hollywood feature and then into a TV series. And so these people knew that because David was contacting people. He was posting it on social media. There was no doubt that he was still working on it. So they've never explained why he just, he's working on it up until late December, and then what happened. There's no motive for this case. They have no motive. So
Exactly. Oh, and this goes way back. This goes way back to our last conversation. I think it was that radio podcast that got posted, and I listened to it. It was an interview. They
Yes.
interviewed him,
Mhm.
and some of the things that I found really interesting was one of the things when they jokingly asked him if he was related to Aleister Crowley.
Right.
his reaction, he was not amused.
Right.
He was not amused, and he talked up. He quoted scripture in that interview, and he talked about going in a different spiritual direction. And so I seriously wonder if that is what part of the problem was.
Yes, definitely.
Is because he started taking it somewhere else.
Yep. And they will tell you that too. I mean, that's actually documented. It's documented in police reports. It's documented in what the Gray State quote unquote team states, and that's why they were all turning away from it. They were. It was only when David, when it was like, oh no, this is going to happen. This is going to be a big project. And then it was like, okay, they were all kind of silent towards it, and it sounded like they wanted to be part of it at that time. But after he died, they acted like they had distanced themselves from it, which I don't think was true. I don't think at any point they wanted to be distant from it. I think they were all going, including David Crowley, I think they were all going to use Gray State as a way to enter into Hollywood.
And I've seen movie shorts of Danny August Mason's acting. He was not a good actor.
You sent me some of those. I started watching them last night. Acting is tough. I wanted to be an actor for a long time. It's tough, and not everybody has it, unfortunately. But I think David also wanted to be an actor. I watched that one bullet exchange video that you posted, and yeah, that was weird. Now that was made in 2010, right? But that was weird.
The one with the chessboard?
Old Country for No Men, or
the chessboard one.
Oh, the chessboard. That was crazy.
Yeah.
And that was David in there too.
Yeah, and David's brother, and also Mitch Heil. They're all in that.
Yeah, some of that stuff is really. I mean, just because I told Sophia, I was like, some of that stuff is really dark.
It is dark.
I mean,
it is dark.
I can't watch too much of it at one time. I just start going, okay, this is creepy.
Yeah, I have to watch a lot of
And
comedy.
I think that I don't think he necessarily. I think he wanted to break away from that and go in a different direction, and that created a problem.
Yep, I think it's clear.
I think he had a message that he wanted, and that's why I think that it's very ironic, the positioning of his body.
Do you think it was a Christian
wall.
message? It was a more Christian message that he was working
I
towards?
think so.
Yeah.
I think so, because I mean, even in the trailer with the triangle marking on the arm, I mean, the
Mhm.
mark. You take the mark, and obviously, from the trailer, it shows that the woman doesn't have the mark when she goes into the grocery store, and she can't buy anything
Mhm.
because she doesn't have the mark. And so, I mean, what other conclusion can you draw from that?
True. And if David was working with Satanists on this project, if there were some anti-Christians, like real anti-Christian, not just people who are just like, oh, there's no God, there's no Jesus, but I mean people who know that there is a God, who know that there is Jesus Christ, and hate him and want to physically,
Mhm.
do harm to people that are that are talking about Jesus Christ. So, uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think there might be something there too, but.
I think there's something big connected in that way. I really do.
Yeah. Uh, we'll talk to you about it afterwards, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
It's not something to talk about on here.
All right. Well, we can always talk about this budget book here on page 285. And like I said, this is an 80 sheet document and 80 sheets. And you can see at the bottom, these are handwritten. That's the other thing. For whatever reason, they decided to write on this notepad. I don't know. Hopefully, they wrote on a copy of the notepad, not the actual notepad itself. But when I looked at some of the notes, I'm not so sure. So that's a whole nother issue. But this had 80 sheets, front and back. But when it was found in the house on January 17th, 2015, this only had 59 pages, front and back. So what we're looking at here is the first known page. This isn't necessarily the first page, but there might have been pages that were ripped out before this page and maybe after this page too. So I'm going to make this a little smaller so I can put it into proper context here to what we're looking at. And what we're looking at here is page 1 of this budget book, and we all agree this is Kamel, right? This is her writing this. You guys think? I mean, if she wrote budget book, she must have written this part, the first page, September 11th,
Mhm.
September 2011. So it's just a nice little budget book, right? Nothing there, nothing too crazy. Shows that they were budgeting way back then, so that's good. Now this is 41A-1, so this is the very first page that was in there. We don't know what else was in there before or after, but we know that then this was 2011. Okay, so that's 41A-1. Now they have something here for October of 2011. Electricity, expenses, all that stuff. Cell phone, which we know all about that. Groceries, and it looks like whatever they were going to write in October, they didn't really finish. So that's also 41A-1, and you see this B down here. That means that this is the back side. So I'm going to go back up to page 286, and on 286 you can see 41A-1F, and you see that F because that shows that this is the front. So really, you would have to. I mean, if we only got 24 pages, I'm assuming there was nothing on any of the other pages. I don't know why they would just give us some of the pages, so I'm just assuming right now that we were given all of the pages that they had for this notebook as a data dump. Now, November 2011, you can see it's some of the same things. So this is kind of like something that's like auto filled out, which shows planning, future planning. This is 2011, but it shows that they had been planning. They're trying to calculate their expenses And I think this is just one more little thing to go against the theory that they were bad with money and all that stuff. I don't think that that's true.
Well, the credit report proves that they weren't bad with money.
What did the credit report say? What it just said that they paid.
He had no delinquent payments whatsoever. He paid more than minimum payments for all of his credit cards and accounts. He was always on time, if not paid early. And when I'm talking about paying more than minimum, I'm talking sometimes between $100 to $1,000 more.
Wow. That's planning for the future.
Yeah, it is.
You're not going to pay bills in the future.
And he wasn't behind in the house payments. It's right there on the credit report. He was not behind in his house payments. And I'm only stating that because there are certain people saying that the house was already being foreclosed before their death. And that is an absolute flat-out lie.
Correct.
And the proof is there in the credit report.
Yep. All you have to do is look. So looking at page 290 here, this is the this is page 20 of the ESDA lifts. Obviously you'll see there's nothing here. It's because it's just in indented writing. And you're going to see that same thing on 41A-21, which is this page we're looking at right here. So that's some deep handwriting, especially when you think about it. If there's no other ESDA lifts, nothing like that, why was David writing so deeply, so intently here, but not anywhere else, including where they claim David wrote, "Submit to Allah, open the rise"? Doesn't match. Doesn't match if this is what David wrote here. So this page right here, now we're looking at page 292. We're looking at Open the Rise, most recent version. You can see all of the blood on here. You can see clearly on this page. And let me just scroll down so I can see what page. So this is 41A-30. So this is page 30. This, I do think, is the page, the one page that was tested, that was DNA tested for blood. That would make the most sense here. The problem with that is that 41-2, which I believe is what we're looking at right here, it was tested for blood. It found a mix of 2 or more people. It does not match David or his daughter. Does not match David or his daughter. It does match his wife. So if you have a mix of 2 or more people, it matches David's wife. Doesn't match him or his daughter. Where is that other source coming from? And this is very important here because this is one of the notes that they claim David wrote that had something to do with killing his wife, killing his daughter, and killing himself. Yet his blood, his DNA, is not found on it. His daughter's is not found on it. But there's a mixture of 2 or more people. Who is that other person? And so that's why so many people have been, thinking, well, that just shows, David. How do you prove David wrote this? How do you prove any of that?
That's
and
a very
where
good point.
where is that other DNA source coming from?
It's a very, very good point. And we don't have those answers.
It's very frustrating. So you can see, and I know on this page it's really hard to see, but there's a lot. There's blood. If you can see the cursor, there's blood up here, right in here, right? That looks like some ridge detail or something. You got some blood in here. I think all of this is blood too. All of this right here is blood. All this is blood. There's a lot of blood here, and it's not It's not David's. It's not his wife. You got another little one right here too. I mean, it's all over this page, and it's with his
The
left hand.
detail on the crime scene photo is actually really good. You can actually make out prints on the JPEG on the crime scene photo.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's BCA 5095.
Oh, let's see if I can look at that. 5095. Let's see if I can pull that up. Five 095. Oh yeah, it's really down there. Come on. There it is. 5095. Let's look at that. Yeah, there's even more here. Yeah, you're right. Look at that. That is a lot. It's kind of nice how that pin is just laying there, just, right next to it. I mean, even the way this is, this this looks staged too.
Yeah,
Pin's
there's no
just sitting
blood
there.
on the pen.
There is some blood on the pin, but they couldn't tie it to David.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the pin is
I
item
see it.
40. It's probably not on this section of the pin, but it's lower down.
If you zoom in really close on the pen at the top, you can kind of see
Oh, really?
a red tint.
Oh, let me see that.
I can't see the pictures right now. What side of the pad is the pen on?
Is it the right? Okay.
It is on the right. It is on the right side.
Okay. I'm questioning it because I'm dyslexic, so I'm like trying to see it in my head and reverse it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it is on the right side.
I couldn't remember either.
Let's see. Oops. 5095, right? That's the one. Yeah. Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, you can clearly see it. You can see the blood in all these different areas here, but yeah, I mean, is there blood on the grip of the pen? That's where it should be, really.
One would think. I'm using Photo Viewer right now. I believe there is a red tint on it.
Yeah, it kind of looks like that. But there's blood all over this page here, and if you look at the very bottom, you can't see it because every time I move my cursor, it covers it. But if you look at the bottom here, you can see how many pages, and it's almost all of them, have blood marks on them.
So whoever's hands must have brushed the side of the pages.
Yeah, they've flipped it open. They flipped it open. What's weird is they flip it open, and then they flip it open again because you have this page up top here on the north side of this image, and I don't know what was on that page. I want to know what was on that page. And I think that is the one that shows talks about all the stuff that he was looking into, like building 7 and a lot of interesting things. That's probably another one of these photos in here too. But
I don't know. I still see that as submit to Alan and not submit to Allah.
No, I don't see that.
It's okay. We can agree to disagree.
That can happen, yes.
Well, I mean, he was writing to Jason Allen, and it's very possible he might have wanted to share that with him.
But why would he write it on this piece of paper here? It doesn't make sense to me. And
as
that
a note, he jotted down notes all the time to himself.
Yeah. But not in this way. I mean, when you look at this page, I think what separates this page from a lot of other pages, in my view, is the way that it's written here. This is written like like a big poster card. Like it's written to make sure that whoever walks into this room sees it. Whereas everything else in this notepad is written like it's David taking notes. So I don't think that he would write open the rise this big if he was writing notes to himself. And I think if he was writing submit to Jason Allen now or whatever, I think that also would be on one line. I don't think it would be written like this. This to me is like something you would write at a wrestling show. You would get a big, signboard, and you would write this because you want people to see it. And to me, this is one of the clearest things that looks staged.
Okay, now, what if it had originally said at one time, it doesn't even have to have been the day that they were killed, was submit to Allen, and then, or open the rise, submit to Allen. Not, and the now was written later because they thought it said submit to Allah.
It's that in, because the in does not match. So Allah, if you look at open and Allah and recent, it's not the same. I mean, even all three of those are not the same. Even version, version, open, and recent, those are ends. H is, the, and then Allah, to me, those kind of match more too. But again, I'm not really big on the handwriting thing. I look at after looking at this stuff, I've looked at my handwriting and seen how different my own handwriting has been and how differently I can write within a couple pages.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just another thought on how to look at the thing. And we have no idea when this was written.
Well, I mean, also, Jason Allen, it's spelled Aalen as well. So, and David would know how to spell that. I do remember hearing that theory. I heard it. I remember hearing it a lot, but I never really, it never really stuck out to me.
Maybe it just stands out to me because as I'm jotting notes down and stuff, I misspell things all the time. Even people's last names, and it's just notes for myself. I'm not going to have other people looking at it.
Right.
And I don't think even David expected people to be looking at his notes like this.
Well, it's weird that it's open like this.
Could it have been an idea for the script, though? Like open, meaning open scene. And then, that was his idea. In the opening scene, there was going to be some kind of situation where people are being told to submit to Allah. That could have been some kind of idea that he had for a scene. Could have been brainstorming.
That's possible. Yeah. Even the pin item 40, which is this pin here, it's closed. It's like everything is set. It's a scene that we're made to look at here. Interesting.
So what kind of pen is it? So I can't see the picture.
It says TUL on it.
No, I mean, like, is it a click pen or is it a pen with a lid?
It looks like a click pen.
And is it? Were you saying that it was like closed? Is that what you said?
It's definitely closed. I mean, I'm looking at it now. It's definitely closed. So either it's a twist or it's a, it's a click. But whoever wrote this wrote it and then closed it.
That's weird. I mean, okay, so you've killed your wife and your daughter, and you're writing this as your suicide note, and you're going to take the time to click the pen and close it.
Yeah. And then flip this page up and keep this page flipped up, right?
No. Yeah, I mean, he would be in such a frenzy. I mean, I'm surprised that the pen is even next to the pad. But he would have been in a frenzy.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
And he cleaned up part of the crime scene and wrote on the wall and did all kinds of things. But he was in such, a frenzy and snapped.
But he tiptoed around, though. He tiptoed around.
Oh, he did more than that. I mean, he magically missed all the wood floor.
Yeah, levitated.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding blood on that pen, but I know that there is. I think it's just the photos that I have here. So let's see. So yeah, so that's that's the big one right there. That's really the big page. Let me go back to that. 290, I believe, right? Okay. So let's go down. And this is okay, and this was written on the back of the page. That was the other thing too. This is written on the back of page 30. I thought was kind of weird. That really threw me off. Definitely. Because I had thought that this page that we're looking at right now, we're looking at page 293. I thought that this was the page, and then David flipped it open. So I thought this was open here. David or somebody goes and sits down there, and then they and this is in the crime scene photos too. This page here. So it'd be good to find the blood on this page. I can almost see it here, but keep this open, right? They keep this open, and that's why the other page. I'm gonna go back to here. It looks like it's flipped open. Well, it is flipped open. Item 41 is flipped open. And that was the other thing. Well, he takes the time to make sure that the pin is closed, but doesn't take the time to fully fold this notepad. Because what's on the page before this notepad, I thought, is the same that's on page 293. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure. Now, what's on page 293 is some of the most important things that have stuck out to a lot of people ever since we first saw this page here. Read this stuff, okay? So, and what is this for? Is this for David's script? Is this for, not the script, but for the Rise? Is this for his documentary film? And some of the stuff that is crossed out, why is it crossed out? Is some crossed out? It's that stuff that he's fully set on. He's got his research. He's got his facts on. What is going on here? So you have the cartoon compilations, and that's crossed out. Fast and Furious, and that's crossed out. Now, there could be two different Fast and Furious. Obviously, it could be the Fast and Furious movies. I don't think that that's true. I think it's more related to Fast and Furious, which was a gun smuggling thing that the people under Barack Obama got caught doing. So it's really important to research
Holder.
Fast and Furious. Yes, thank you. Eric Holder. That's right. And that's crossed out. Sandy Hook is the next thing here. It's not crossed out. So Was he researching this stuff and crossing it off? Were these things that he wanted to add in, and then decided they shouldn't be added in? But these are notes, right? These are notes, and again, there's no ESDA prints on the page underneath these, so it's just that's a whole nother issue.
So there was
Mhm.
one that kind of stood out to me.
Which one?
The one on the bottom. It says Stalia executors
Stalin.
or execution. Stalin. Okay, never mind. Never mind. For some reason, I was drawing a conclusion to Justice Scalia, who passed away in 2016, and I thought, well, that's kind of prophetic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But no, not Justice Scalia. No, I misread that. There's just so many different ways that his handwriting goes.
Right.
H's are N's, and T's can look like. He's got bad handwriting like me.
Yep. Same with me.
Do you both print or use cursive?
I never use cursive.
Me neither. Just print.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of doing a survey. I'm asking
I don't think David
people
ever
that I
did
meet.
cursive either.
Yeah, I don't see any cursive.
It's print writing
Hey,
where there's some
Sophia?
cursive mixed in. Mm-hmm.
have
Dr.
you
Strat.
have you touched on what we were talking about with the journal about the Johnny Carson syndrome and all of that being exact quotes out of a book?
Oh, I wasn't going to touch on that yet.
Oh, okay. I wasn't going to say anything if you weren't ready to do that. I won't say anything about it until you're ready, because I know you're working on that. So.
Yes, Catherine and I are working on it.
It's a nice little teaser there. Okay. All right. Let's see. Number 4 is ICE. So I think we all know what ICE is at this point, and the immigration problem in California and in Minnesota, I think, are very similar. Not legal immigration. I'm not talking about anything legal either. This other one, first I thought this was the Titanic underneath ice. I don't think that's right. It's like Tatiana or something. So Tatiana, I think there was like a female singer or something that was involved in the Gray State project. So I think a lot of this is probably meant for the David's documentary that was going to be coming out to coincide with whatever happened with Gray State, with the fictional
No.
TV series.
No. Titanic, there's some conspiracy stuff around that one too. And the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and stuff. So it very possibly could be Titanic.
Just looking at it, it looks like it's Tatiana. But I remember when I first read this, I did think that that's exactly what I thought. I thought that these were all conspiracy theories that David was actually looking at, but that's not true. Because some of these are not. I mean, a cartoon compilation obviously has nothing to do with that. Party music video has nothing to do with that. So that stuff. That's what kind of made me rethink my first thought, I guess.
And one reason why I think that some of this is just ideas that he was jotting down is because in the documentary where they try and make him look like a divisive, horrible person, because he's using the self-talk method where he's saying talk fast, and he's talking about what he's doing. Well, that recording, at the beginning of the recording, he's talking about his pen not working right. And so, I know there's no way we can prove whether he was writing things down when he was talking and recording that. But it's interesting that he was talking about the pen, not working right, and him taking, kind of preparing himself for something.
Right.
So I think that he was probably a big note taker.
Correct. I think that's a great point. That's another great point. BHD. I remember that there was BHD had something to do with the Middle East, if I remember. Let's see if I could find anything. The Bahrain. Something to do with money. Oh yeah, BHD is the currency for Bahrain, an island nation in the Middle East, which is east of Saudi Arabia and in the middle of the Arabian Gulf. Because that image was on here, that's a big thing. So I don't know. Has anybody done any research on that? If not, maybe there's somebody out there listening to this who can help us find out more about BHD. But when you talk about money, when there's money involved, that's when bad things happen.
Mhm.
Underneath that is my enlistment, and that's scribbled out. And I was wondering, is there a difference between things that are crossed out and things that are scribbled out? And then, to make it even more confusing, next to Eric Holder smiling, there's a check mark. So just throw it. I'm like, okay, at that point I was like, well, maybe I'm just thinking way too deeply into this stuff. So what I've been focusing on is what is not crossed out or scribbled out and what is. So I don't know if those are things that have not been done. But the most interesting one to me is Building 7, because when I first learned about David Crowley, when I first learned about this case, the big thing I wanted to understand was his view on September 11th. And I still don't know. I still don't really have a clear view of what he thought about September 11th, other than to say that I can guess that he probably did not think that what the government told us was true.
Pretty sure he wanted to keep that under wraps until he released the film.
Yeah, he'd be smart too. I mean, he could have. I mean, he would have gotten a bigger audience if he. Really, especially during 2012, he would have gotten a much bigger audience if he would have been more vocal about September 11th. That's just my view, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that just wasn't part of his plan, or maybe I don't know. Maybe it wasn't that big of a deal to him. But at some point, if he had issues, if he understood that what we were doing in Iraq and in some of these other countries was wrong, that our soldiers should not have been sent overseas after September 11th. If he understood that at any point, and I believe that he did, at some point he's going to start researching September 11th. And once you do that, go ahead.
Where did you say the one referring to the money? What country was it?
Bahrain, was it?
Yeah. Bahrain. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but and the BHD is the currency of that island nation.
Is that near Saudi Arabia?
It's
is that what you said?
Yeah, which is to the east of Saudi Arabia, in the middle of the Arabian Gulf.
Because the interesting thing is the
a dinar.
Supposed hijackers.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So I don't know if there was, if he was wondering about some exchange of currency having to do with something that had to do with 9/11, or I'm just trying to think. Now I'm intrigued. I'm gonna have to research that. But
Well, yeah, and when
I
you
just
think about the fact that his wife was born in a Saudi Arabian, or in a U.S. In a base on
mhm.
in Saudi Arabia, I wonder if he ever talked with Kamel's dad about this stuff at all at any time.
And what's really interesting is if these were topics that he was considering, touching on, it's interesting that, he posted about distancing himself from a lot of the groups that he had been associated with. For some reason he was like, unjoining, or however you want to say it,
Mm-hmm.
those groups on Facebook. Remember he made that post about that?
Yep, he was happily unsubscribing.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, it's interesting. I wonder, what made him do that, if he just didn't agree, or it's just interesting to see, if maybe he was more interested in, one topic than the other, or it's what it seems to me like he was trying to piece something together
Right.
with what it seems to me like he was trying to connect those particular things possibly to something.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think everything on this list, this is all part of something. He's creating something, and it makes sense if it's his documentary film. Now, the only thing that made me think that maybe that's not true is that a lot of this stuff isn't in his, leaked version. So I don't know. And if anybody hasn't seen the leaked version, it has the music is kind of weird and everything, and there's, it is a rough cut, but I think it is a lot better than the version that was created after David died. Even though they say that that was his version and they just took his notes and made it, but I don't know.
But maybe this is what he actually wanted to do.
Right. Right.
But didn't, and that's why I'm wondering if that submit to Allah now was opening scene. I mean, I guess he could have written out opening scene, or, he could have just said open, and then in his thought process, the opening scene would be submit to Allah now, kind of like, the guillotine scene he had, and then he also had the scene with people being executed, in the regular trailer. So, it sounds very much like an opening scene to me, like a direction he was wanting to take.
Hard to say, I think. Going down here, page 294. Now we're looking at a lot of other scribbled things. Everything on this page is basically scribbled out. So I don't know if that means that he completed this or what, but this is a B-roll shot list. And the opening shot shows dancing cops, soundbite from Fuck Up Generals. It's 9/11 or ITS 911. And so this is why when I look at the the page submit to all of this is why I don't think it's part of any
Oh,
script or
okay.
anything like that
Okay.
is because this kind
Okay.
of on the next page he's like it just that whole page and that's page 293 in this document. It just seems so out of place. It's just so staged. And I don't know. I think it would be really interesting to see who actually wrote that. Sorry, page 292. To see who actually wrote Open the Rise most recent version, submit to Allah now. Who actually wrote that and what type of proof we could actually get. Because, if I have no problem saying that David wrote it, but at this point, I can't say that. Nobody can say that. So those tests need to be done, and obviously the Apple Valley Police Department and the investigators are not going to do it. But something like that needs to be done to find out who actually wrote this. Now the bigger question is, why do the Apple Valley Police think that David Crowley wrote this when there is when his DNA, his blood is not on there. His wife's is. Obviously, she didn't write it, right? Unless they're going to go with some weird pack theory or something. She didn't write it. Um, and there's another DNA source. If there is another blood DNA source on page 292, is it possible that that other DNA source wrote this?
Well, I think that the reason why they may have done that is because of like what it says in that article that I shared about, so many, it happens often.
That's
they
gonna
get this
that's
narrative in their head,
mhm.
and then they just go with it. They don't think in any other direction.
I do think that's going to be our next topic too, going over what was written in that, because that it was that's a whole nother topic, and that needs to be covered too, because obviously there's some similar things here to where you just walk in and just think that it's a murder, suicide, or whatever. Why, it's like it shouldn't be like that. That, yeah, that's going to be a whole nother discussion, definitely. I look forward to that one.
Well, and it's really interesting, and I won't digress, but it's really interesting how, because they just go with statistics. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if something happens to a woman, if she's married, they automatically question spouse first. Because statistically, it usually is. But just because it statistically is doesn't mean it is.
Great point.
And I think that's where a lot of mistakes are made.
Excellent point. All right, just kind of wrapping up here, looking at page 294 still, where we see the B-roll shot list. Part of that B-roll shot list says that the FBI doesn't find hijackers' passports. That's got to be 911, right? It's got to be tied to that.
Yeah, I would think so.
So if he's doing like like FBI finds or doesn't find hijacker passports, I guess that would be a either a support or an opposition to the accepted 9/11 theory.
Right.
But
right, because they've said that they found them, but I mean, how did? Yeah, some of the things are just like, okay, yeah, it's. That's why I see what you're saying. I do like how he writes FBI finds / doesn't find hijacker passports, because they claim that they found them. When you really look at it, it's like, well, it's hard to believe that you would find them, especially if the planes, If the planes went into buildings and everything, probably not going to find a passport, a little piece of paper. That's
I
interesting.
mean, you have a bigger chance of finding Billy Joe in HR who works the 101st floor's hip bone as opposed to one little bitty passport.
Correct. Well, even I think
So I
even
mean,
5 years later, they were finding bones on building tops after 911. That far late, they were still finding body bones. So it's just like, but yet everything that they needed to prove that these 19 people were guilty was all there. Basically, you know, right there. I mean, within a couple days too. It's very
the
similar.
public is gullible, so they'll believe anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because we've been, our grandparents and their grandparents, whatever, they were they were told to trust whatever is on channel 2, channel 4, channel 5, channel 7. It,
Well,
they had a lot of faith in them, and I don't know if that was if they just were not smart enough to recognize that they were being lied to, if maybe media was different back then. I don't know, but I do know that my grandparents, if they see it on TV, most likely they're going to think that it's true. And that's
very
how they
true.
were raised. Next, you have gross pics of queen slash lizard, and then RP
Oh,
reptile. So I don't know if that was Ron Paul reptile or RP, but that one really stuck out to me. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, that's got to be the Queen Elizabeth theory that she's a
She's a
Yeah.
reptile.
reptile alien.
David Icke.
David
But what
Icke.
is RP?
Ron Paul?
No, there's got to
I
be
don't know.
somebody else. He wouldn't have
he's
been speaking for Ron Paul if he thought he was reptilian.
Good point. Good point there. All right. Good point.
It sounds like he's paying homage to Alex Jones, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This definitely could have been some kind of like comic relief in the movie. Just an idea.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, because this is B-roll footage, so it's all just. I would be curious to see what that footage was.
This is like every conspiracy theory out there.
Right. Right. And this must have been at least at past 2014, at least in 2014, because one of the bottom things says 2014 compilations. So I think this might have been
Mm.
written, late in David's life. And this might have just been him, like you said, just gathering, like, okay, here are some of the theories that we can put out there, that people have been talking about. And around that time, the reptilian theory had popped up again. And I know David Icke has been around for a long, long time, and me and my Christian, brothers, we talk about that, and how David Icke would talk about Jesus Christ isn't real. And at that point, I stopped listening to David Icke. I didn't need to know anything else further than that. But that was just my personal view on it. But a lot of this stuff here, kind of shows that, I mean, we're talking about very, very late in David's life, at the very least. Jews, Rockefeller, Rothschilds, world domination picks is what I get from the next sentence there.
Hmm.
So I mean,
again,
yeah,
another
another,
conspiracy theory.
right? And that's a big one, right there.
It is. It really is.
Government spying.
Not so much a conspiracy theory.
Then it goes on to list like TVs and Xboxes and how they're trying to put cameras on everything.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Now David didn't have a TV in his house.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And didn't he cover up his computer?
Yeah, he did. Yes, he did.
I myself don't even own a television, come to think of it.
I have a TV, but I don't have cable. no
No.
interest in cable.
No, I don't watch TV. I didn't own one until my daughter moved back in with me, and they are huge gamers. And so they have like a big one in the living room and then one in their bedroom, but I just don't watch TV. So there's just nothing on there that interests me.
I wonder if that list could be like a montage that he was thinking of doing.
Well, if it's B-roll footage, it's going to be stuff that he's using kind of in the background, or just kind of breakup stuff. But it's something that he definitely had planned on using, I would think. Let's see, 294.
So he was planning. So he was for sure planning.
Correct. Correct. NYPD car-mounted body scanners. I think
that was a big thing back in 2012. That was a big
Yeah.
scare about that. I remember that.
That's right. That's right. What's under that? I can't tell. It looks like RAMB. I cannot tell. RAUB, but that's crossed out too. I can't tell. So the NYPD thing, I think, is the only one on this page that is not crossed out. So that's interesting. 20,014 compilations is, and this is page 32. So this is, and this is the front of page 32, 41A-32, looking at page 294 of the 488-page document here. All right, do need to wrap this up here fairly quickly, but we're looking at page 295, film festivals with a question mark. I can't tell what's underneath that. I can't tell what is scratched out. But then underneath that is VOD. So this is more planning for his future. This is planning the documentary, perhaps. That's what I would think. I don't think he's that far. Maybe this is for the fictional Gray State, but I don't believe so. I think this is more related to his documentary. VOD, video on demand, rent in HD, release before or after investor contact or during. So he's planning, he's plotting. All this is all planning for the future.
He takes notes like we do at work.
He's a military guy. Yeah, what do you expect?
In military, I know. I kind of do the same thing, but like I take notes like this and then I never look at them ever again. So he may be the kind of thinker that I am. If I write it down, I'll remember it. If I don't look at it again, and if it's that important, yes, I'll open up the notebook and I'll look for my scribbler.
Right. Yeah.
So, just this is like a scary similarity.
I agree. No, I got the same thing. I got many notepads and notebooks with just random things like this, because you want to write it down to keep it fresh. And somehow writing it down helps you know that you did write it, and you can always go back to it later on. And this is page 32. This is the back of page 32 that we're looking at here, with the film festivals and all that stuff. And there's a note down here. It says, once there's money, you have to pay everyone. But that might not be so bad. And then there's another note that says that no money is best.
It just kind of reminds me of those skits that he has on his Hothead Productions.
Why is that?
Where there's just random phrases that they're saying. Like the chessboard one.
Mm-hmm.
They're just having random crazy sayings, and
just random.
It just reminded me of that.
Well, and one thing I was thinking about is he might have written, just brainstormed every single thing that he was thinking, even if it was contradictory to other things that he was thinking, so that he would have alternatives. Because remember his friends saying that he would have more than one plan. He wouldn't just have one plan. That when he's talking about him, he says that because he was trained that way, and so he could have, been tossing different scenarios around because he may have had more than one thought process going.
That's right.
Well, I'm going to have to end the conversation for myself here. We have plans tonight.
All right, my friend.
So-
That sounds good. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and shut this down here right now. But I'd like to come back maybe sometime this week and finish up on this.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here, and I'm going to go ahead and shut this down, and we will schedule another thing, a part 2 of this, and we'll finish up on this and then get into some of the other topics, talking about the suicide versus murder theory. All right, good peeps. Till next time.
Thank you, Christy and Justin, for joining us.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you all for
thanks,
having me.
y'all.
yeah, it was a lot
Talk
of
to y'all
fun.
soon.
You got it.
Okay.
Good night, Greg.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good night, good peeps.